Emma dragged her feet along the dimly lit sidewalk, the muffled sounds of the city surrounding her like a distant orchestra she had no energy to enjoy. Her back ached from 12 hours on her feet, moving from one task to another, juggling orders, schedules, and demands that never seemed to end. Her palms still smelled faintly of cleaning detergent and coffee, the scents of her 2 jobs that had become a part of her skin, reminders that her life was a constant grind. She paused under a flickering street lamp, taking a moment to catch her breath and glance at the small backpack slung across her shoulder. Inside, carefully tucked, was her most prized possession tonight, her wallet. Not because it was luxurious, it was a simple, worn leather wallet with a few frayed stitches, but because it contained the only things that mattered right now: enough money for groceries and her child's upcoming rent payment. Her 3-year-old son, Lucas, was waiting for her at the tiny apartment she rented on the 5th floor of a run-down building, just a few blocks from the cafe where she'd been working her late shift. She imagined his small frame curled under a faded blanket, his soft breathing echoing the steady rhythm of her heart. Every evening, she pictured him smiling, maybe building a fortress with his stuffed animals, oblivious to the weight pressing down on his mother. But tonight, her mind kept replaying a different scene. The fridge was nearly empty, the cupboards bare except for a few cans of beans and a bag of rice that had seen better days. She needed her wallet now more than ever. The cafe had been bustling when she left. Even at 10 o'clock, the faint hum of conversation, clinking cups, and the hiss of the espresso machine made it feel like a tiny haven. But now, walking away, her thoughts were on bills, overdue notices, and the looming fear of disappointing her son. She had been so careful today, counting her money, making sure she had just enough to cover groceries and rent. That's why the sudden jolt of realization hit her like a lightning bolt. She had left her wallet on the cafe table. Emma froze mid-step, her breath catching in her throat. The world seemed to narrow to a single point, the small leather wallet still sitting somewhere under the warm glow of the cafe's pendant lamps. Panic clawed at her chest. Every step she'd taken since leaving seemed too far, and the city streets, usually familiar, suddenly felt like a labyrinth. Her mind raced. What if someone had taken it? What if it was gone forever? The money inside wasn't much, but it was all she had. Her entire week's planning, every careful calculation, depended on that wallet. She turned back instinctively, almost running, but stopped herself. Her legs ached too much, and adrenaline wasn't enough to carry her through the fatigue pressing down on her body. She debated her options. Go back and hope the cafe staff had noticed? Call the number on her wallet's ID card? But the phone in her pocket buzzed first, reminding her she had no time to hesitate. If she didn't act quickly, her night and her week could spiral into a nightmare. Emma's fingers trembled as she dialed the cafe, her thumb hovering over the screen. She rehearsed what she would say. "Hi, I think I left my wallet." But before she could finish her sentence, she realized she might have misread the number scribbled on her receipt. The cafe's busy hum had left her distracted, and in her exhausted state, she had written down the wrong digit. Her heart sank. She had no idea if she was calling the right person, and the thought of explaining her desperation to a stranger made her cheeks flush. Still, there was no other choice. Her son's dinner, her rent payment, the groceries she needed, all of it depended on this moment. She pressed send on the text she had drafted. "Hi, I think I left my wallet at Cafe Bella tonight. Can you please let me know if you have it?" Her fingers hovered for a heartbeat over the call button before she sent it, a small pang of anxiety twisting in her stomach. She didn't know who she was texting, didn't know if they would reply, or worse, if they would ignore her completely. The streets felt colder now, the night sharper against her skin. Emma pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and kept walking, glancing back at the cafe windows that were now dim, shadows stretching across the sidewalk. Every car that passed made her flinch, every pedestrian a potential witness to her failure. Her thoughts returned to Lucas. How would she explain to him that there might be no milk tonight, no dinner that she had promised would be there? Her chest tightened with the fear of letting him down. She thought about her life, the years of struggle she had endured since becoming a single mother. The long shifts, the tiny apartment, the constant balancing act between providing and surviving, it all felt heavier tonight. She wondered if things would ever change or if exhaustion and worry would always be her companions. And yet, beneath the anxiety, there was a flicker of determination. She had made it this far. She had managed to put food on Lucas's plate for 3 years straight. She wasn't about to give up now. Emma slowed down as she approached the small park near her apartment building. She sank onto a bench, letting her bag fall to her side. The cool metal was uncomfortable against her tired legs, but she needed a moment to breathe. She watched the streetlights reflecting off puddles left by an earlier drizzle, the world moving around her in a blur. Her phone vibrated. She jumped, heart hammering, and scrambled to pick it up. A notification glowed on the screen. Someone had replied. Her hands shook as she unlocked the phone. The message was short, almost cryptic. "I have it. Where can I bring it?"
Emma stared at the text, disbelief flooding through her. This stranger, this number she didn't recognize, had responded. Her mind raced. Who was this person? Were they just being polite, or could she trust them? The hope that had been dormant for months began to stir, a tiny flame flickering in the darkness of her exhaustion.
She typed back quickly, her fingers clumsy with urgency. "Thank you. Can you meet me outside Cafe Bella? I can't come far." Then she pressed send, holding her breath as if the universe itself had paused in anticipation. The night stretched around her, every sound amplified. Distant sirens, the rustle of leaves, the hum of a passing car. Emma's mind refused to settle. Every 2 minutes felt like an eternity, and yet, in the midst of the fear and anxiety, a spark of curiosity ignited. Who was this stranger? What would happen when they arrived? Could this night, so heavy with worry and desperation, turn into something completely unexpected? She glanced at the sky, the street lamps casting long shadows on the wet pavement, and for the first time that evening, allowed herself to hope. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. Everything was about to change. Emma's pulse raced as she fumbled for her phone, the tiny screen glowing faintly in the darkness of the park bench where she had collapsed moments ago. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to move faster, to reclaim what was hers, to ensure that the small thread of stability she had painstakingly maintained for her little boy wasn't snapped tonight. She tapped on the contacts app, scrolled past dozens of names, some familiar, some forgotten, and finally settled on the cafe's number she had scribbled down on a napkin hours earlier. She pressed the call button, only to realize halfway through dialing that something felt off. The number looked correct at a glance, but her tired eyes and shaking hands betrayed her. Her mind, still spinning from the long hours and sleepless nights, couldn't keep up with the details. She hesitated. Should she hang up and double-check the number, or trust her instincts and hope that it was right? There was no time. Her son's needs were immediate, and every passing minute without the wallet was another minute of uncertainty, another minute of worry gnawing at her chest. Taking a deep breath, she tried to steady her trembling hands. "Come on, Emma," she whispered to herself, the words almost drowned out by the distant sounds of the city. "It's just a wallet, just a number. It'll be fine." Her voice, small and fragile, barely carried over the soft hum of the late-night traffic. She pressed the call button again, only to be met with silence. A robotic voice answered. "The number you have dialed is not in service. Please check the number and try again." Her stomach dropped. The tight knot of anxiety that had been coiled in her chest for hours suddenly constricted even further. She dropped the phone onto her lap, staring at it like it might offer some secret solution. She could feel the first beads of sweat forming on her forehead, not from the physical exertion of walking, but from the crushing weight of uncertainty. If she couldn't reach the cafe, if no one had noticed her wallet, what would she do? The groceries she planned to buy for Lucas, the money she had meticulously saved to pay rent, everything depended on this one little piece of leather. Desperation began to creep in. Emma tapped the screen repeatedly, as though sheer willpower could force the phone to connect. She thought about running back to the cafe, but it was already closed. The streets grew dark, the doors locked, the tables empty. There was no one there to explain her situation to, no friendly barista to hand her the wallet with a reassuring smile. The city felt cold now, unwelcoming, indifferent to her plight. She felt small, invisible even, as though her struggles were being swallowed by the vast, impersonal night. Then, almost by accident, she noticed the messaging app on her phone. She had already tried calling. Maybe, just maybe, texting would work. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, uncertain. Who would she send the message to? The number she dialed didn't work, but she remembered seeing it scribbled on the receipt. She typed it in carefully, double-checking each digit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. She paused at the last number, her hand shaking uncontrollably. Her thumb hovered over the send button. Her mind raced with all the worst-case scenarios. What if she was sending it to a stranger? What if they ignored her? What if they mocked her or hung up? What if this mistake made things worse instead of better? She swallowed hard, tasting the metallic tang of fear in her mouth. And yet, beneath the fear, there was a spark of determination. She had come this far. She had endured sleepless nights and endless days of work, balancing jobs and responsibilities that would crush anyone else. She couldn't give up now. She had to try. Finally, with a trembling hand, she pressed send. The tiny vibration of the phone against her palm felt like an electric shock. She stared at the screen, watching the 3 little dots that indicated the message was being delivered. Her eyes darted around the empty park, every shadow and flicker of movement making her heart leap. The city felt alive in a way it hadn't before. Every distant siren, every rustle of leaves, every passing car, amplified by the intensity of her emotions. Emma leaned back on the bench, trying to steady her racing thoughts. She ran her fingers through her hair, tugging at the strands in frustration and anxiety. What if no one responded? What if this was the final failure in a long line of challenges she had faced alone? The thought made her chest tighten painfully,
but she forced herself to breathe, in and out, slow and steady. She reminded herself that she had faced hard nights before, that she had survived, and that she would survive this too. She had to. Minutes passed. Each one felt longer than the last, stretching time into an almost unbearable slow motion. Emma's eyes never left the phone. Every notification sound made her jump. Every vibration made her heart leap, and every shadow made her flinch. She felt trapped between hope and fear, suspended in a moment that seemed impossibly fragile. The city around her moved in normal rhythms, oblivious to her turmoil, and yet every detail, the flicker of the street lamps, the hum of the distant traffic, the occasional rustle of a stray cat, felt amplified by her heightened senses. Then, as if the universe had finally taken pity, her phone buzzed. A new message appeared on the screen. Emma's hands shook as she unlocked the device. She blinked, hardly believing
what she saw. A stranger had replied. The screen displayed the text, simple but unmistakable. I have it. Where should I bring it? For a moment, Emma could only stare at the message, her mind frozen in disbelief. She read it over and over, each time hoping it wasn't a mistake. She had expected silence, or worse, a curt dismissal, and yet here it was, a reply, a lifeline she hadn't dared to imagine. Her chest tightened, but not with fear this time. This was hope, fragile and flickering, but unmistakable. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she typed back, explaining where she could meet the stranger. Each word was a mix of urgency and politeness, desperation tempered with the awareness that she was dealing with someone she didn't know at all. Her mind raced with questions. Who was this person? Were they trustworthy? Would they actually come? Or was this some cruel trick? She forced herself to push these thoughts aside, focusing instead on the small glimmer of possibility that had just entered her life. Emma couldn't help but imagine all the ways this interaction could go wrong. She pictured the stranger never showing up, or worse, someone dangerous using her information against her. But she also imagined the best-case scenario: the wallet returned, groceries purchased, rent secured, and her son's immediate needs met. The tension was unbearable, but the hope, however small, was intoxicating. As she waited, Emma's thoughts drifted to Lucas. She imagined his wide, curious eyes, the way he would curl up in her lap, the sound of his laughter filling the tiny apartment. Every moment that passed without the wallet felt like an injustice to him, and every hope she dared to feel was motivated by the image of him safe, fed, and happy. Her emotions were a tangled web of fear, hope, guilt, and determination, each thread pulling her in different directions, but all leading back to a single point. She had to get that wallet back. Time seemed to stretch into infinity. Emma's legs ached from sitting on the hard bench, her back ached from the weight of exhaustion, and her mind raced with 1,000 what-ifs. Yet through it all, she felt a strange sense of anticipation, as if she were standing on the edge of something monumental, though she didn't know exactly what. The night air was cold against her skin, but she barely noticed. Her entire focus was on the small device in her hand, the text message glowing like a beacon in the darkness. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, she saw a figure approaching from the distance. Emma's heart leaped into her throat. The figure was moving quickly but not recklessly, their movements purposeful and deliberate. She squinted, trying to make out details in the dim light, every shadow and flicker of movement magnified by her anxious eyes. Could this be the person? Could this be the one who held the key to her immediate relief, to the stability she had been clawing at so desperately? The figure stopped a few feet away from the bench. Emma's chest tightened, her throat dry. She didn't know what to say, didn't know if she should run or approach, didn't know if this was the miracle she had been hoping for or a cruel trick of fate, but the glimmer of hope was too strong to ignore. She straightened her back, squared her shoulders, and reached out, ready to take whatever came next. Her phone buzzed again, a new message. "I'm outside. Let's meet." Emma exhaled, a shaky, almost audible sigh of relief. Her body relaxed slightly, though her mind was still racing. This was it. This was the moment where her night could change or fall apart completely. Every emotion she had felt over the past weeks, months, and years seemed to converge into this single instant. The city, indifferent to her plight, continued its rhythm around her, but for Emma, time had slowed, each heartbeat echoing in her ears like a drum. She rose from the bench, her legs unsteady but determined. With each step toward the approaching figure, the tension in her chest eased slightly, replaced by a cautious optimism. She didn't know the stranger, didn't know their intentions, and yet something deep inside her whispered that this was her chance, her break, her moment to reclaim control over the small but crucial pieces of her life. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the approaching figure slow to a stop in front of her.
The dim glow of the streetlights caught the edges of his coat, his shoes glinting faintly as he shifted his weight. She instinctively clutched her bag tighter, half hoping, half fearing that this was some stranger playing a cruel trick on her. Her fingers brushed the corner of her phone, the screen still glowing with his last message. "I'm outside, let's meet." As he stepped closer, she could make out his features, though the shadows made them hard to read. There was a calmness to his demeanor, a quiet confidence that seemed almost out of place at this hour in this run-down part of the city. He held his hands loosely by his sides, not in any threatening way, but with a casual ease that both unsettled and intrigued her. Emma's mind raced. Who was this person? How could someone respond so quickly to a random text? Most people would have ignored it, or worse, ridiculed her. Then he spoke. His voice was warm, measured, and surprisingly gentle. "Hi, you must be Emma." Emma froze, startled. Her jaw went dry. "Yes, that's me," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. She had never been addressed like this in such a composed, polite manner, and yet something in his tone disarmed her. "I got your message," he continued, glancing down at his phone in a way that seemed casual but attentive. "You left this behind." He extended his hand, revealing her small leather wallet, almost pristine despite the long day she had had. Relief washed over her, almost knocking her off balance. She took a step forward, her legs weak, and grasped the wallet with trembling hands. The weight of it was almost symbolic, not just the money inside, but the sense of control over her small, fragile world that it represented. She had feared losing it forever, feared the ripple effect it would have on Lucas and their
survival. And now, here it was, returned by a stranger she didn't understand, a man whose calm presence seemed oddly out of place in her chaotic life. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaky, the words catching in her throat. She wanted to keep her composure, but exhaustion and relief made it impossible. He smiled faintly, but not in a superficial way. It was a smile that reached his eyes, conveying sincerity. "I'm glad I could help," he said. "But are you okay?" Emma blinked, startled. The question was unexpected, almost intimate in a way that startled her further. Most people, if they had returned a wallet, would have just handed it over and walked away. But this man, this stranger, was asking about her well-being, genuinely, without judgment. Her throat tightened. She wanted to say yes, that she was fine, that everything was normal, but the truth was heavy, pressing down on her chest with the weight of weeks of struggle. I'm managing," she said finally, her voice quivering. "It's just been a really long day." She swallowed hard, the lump in her throat making speech difficult. "I didn't mean to bother anyone with this." "You're not a bother," he replied immediately. "No one should have to go through nights like that alone." There was a pause, and then he added, almost casually, "I know what it's like to feel like the world is indifferent to your struggles, but it's not always." Emma stared at him, incredulous. How could a stranger, someone she had never met, someone whose life was probably completely different from hers, say something so personal, so empathetic? There was a softness in his tone, a recognition of her pain that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. He shifted slightly, lowering his voice. "Look, I don't usually get involved in random situations like this, but I can see you're in a tight spot. Let me help." Emma's eyes widened. She wanted to protest, to explain that it wasn't necessary, that she could manage, that she didn't want to impose. But her exhaustion, the tension of the past few hours, and the gnawing worry about Lucas made her hesitate. And something in his calm, steady presence made her think that maybe, just maybe, accepting help wasn't a betrayal or a weakness. I don't know what to say," she murmured, looking down at her wallet. It had always been a symbol of her independence, her ability to keep things together even when life seemed to conspire against her. Accepting help from a stranger felt both frightening and liberating. "You don't have to say anything," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "I just want to make sure you're safe and that your son has what he needs tonight. Let's start there." Emma blinked back tears. She wasn't used to people offering help so freely, without judgment, without expectation. Most people assumed she could handle everything on their own or judged her silently for her struggles. And yet, here was this man, a stranger, extending kindness in a way that felt almost unreal. "Lucas, he's my son," she said softly. He's waiting at home. I want to make sure he's okay." "I understand," he said, nodding. There was no patronizing tone, no hint of condescension, just understanding. "Why don't you tell me where you live? I can make sure you have what you need tonight. You shouldn't have to worry about dinner or essentials when you've already done so much."
Emma's mind spun. The offer was generous, almost unbelievable. She had expected a simple wallet return, maybe a quick nod of politeness, and then silence. Not groceries delivered, not guidance, not this level of care. She hesitated, unsure if she could trust him, unsure if she was imagining the kindness, unsure if accepting it would somehow make her weak or indebted. And yet, she felt something shift inside her. The tight knot of anxiety, fear, and exhaustion that had been coiled inside her chest for hours began to loosen. The tension of the day, the long hours at work, the gnawing worry about her son, all of it seemed to ease just slightly in his presence. Okay, she said finally, her voice trembling. If you're sure, I'm sure, he replied. Consider it a small step. Tonight, your son should be fed, and you should feel a little less burdened. That's all I ask. Emma nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that she hadn't felt in months. She glanced up at him, really looked at him for the first time. He was young, probably not much older than she was, with a calm, confident presence that somehow made her feel safe. His clothes were simple, but expensive, and there was an air of quiet authority about him. She sensed immediately that he was someone who could command rooms, influence decisions, and yet here he was, standing on a dark street corner in the middle of the night, offering help to a stranger. Thank you, she said again, the words failing to fully express the mixture of relief, gratitude, and disbelief coursing through her. He smiled again, faintly, and held out his hand. Let's make sure your son has dinner tonight. You've done enough already. Let me handle the rest for a little while. Emma felt a tear slip down her cheek, quickly wiped it away, embarrassed. She nodded, feeling the first real sense of hope she had felt in weeks. It was astonishing, almost surreal, that someone she didn't know, and who had no reason to care, was offering help so freely, with such genuine concern. As they walked together toward a nearby delivery service he had already arranged, Emma felt the tension in her body ease, replaced by cautious optimism. This was no ordinary stranger. There was something different about him, something unspoken but undeniable. He didn't need to do this. He didn't know her, yet he had chosen to step into his world, even briefly, to make life a little easier, a little safer. For the first time that night, Emma allowed herself to imagine a world where people could be unexpectedly kind, where help could appear when least expected, and where one small act could change the course of an evening, or perhaps even more.
By the time they reached her apartment building, Emma's mind was racing with questions she didn't yet dare to ask. Who was he? Why was he helping her? And could this really be the beginning of something that would change everything for her and Lucas? She still didn't know the answer to any of these questions, but one thing was certain. Tonight, the world had shifted in a way she could not have anticipated, and it all started with a stranger, a simple text, and the unexpected twist of fate that had brought Adrian, her wallet's mysterious savior, into her life. Emma watched, almost in disbelief, as Adrian pulled out his phone and typed rapidly, his brow furrowed in concentration. She had expected the stranger to hand over her wallet and vanish into the night, leaving her with the uneasy thrill of relief. But instead, he was arranging something she could barely imagine: groceries. Her mind whirled as he spoke casually, as if ordering a small delivery for a friend was the most natural thing in the world. "I'm going to have some essentials sent to your apartment tonight," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Milk, eggs, some bread, and a few things for your son. You shouldn't have to worry about dinner tonight." Emma's eyes widened. She stared at him, struggling to find words. I don't know what to say," she whispered, almost afraid that speaking would shatter the surreal moment into reality. It felt unreal, like a dream she had no right to dream. A complete stranger, someone she didn't even know, was ensuring that her son would be fed. Her heart thudded painfully, a mix of awe, disbelief, and gratitude that left her breathless. "It's nothing," Adrian said with a small shrug, though there was a quiet authority in his tone. "Consider it a little help from someone who knows what it's like to struggle, and a small reminder that kindness doesn't have to be complicated." He smiled, faint but genuine, and Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest, chasing away the knots of exhaustion and worry that had been her constant companions for weeks. He didn't stop there. From his coat pocket, he retrieved a small envelope, handing it to her without ceremony. Emma hesitated, fingers brushing the smooth paper. "What's this?" she asked, almost afraid to open it. "A little gift card," he replied simply. "For emergencies. Consider it a cushion. Not much, but enough to make a difference if you ever find yourself in a tight spot again." Emma's hands shook as she accepted the envelope.
She tore it open carefully, half afraid the contents would disappear, half afraid the kindness was some elaborate joke she hadn't yet recognized. Inside was a simple card with a modest balance, enough to buy groceries for a week if she used it wisely. Her eyes blurred with tears she had been holding back for hours, the overwhelming weight of exhaustion, relief, and gratitude pressing on her chest. I can't accept this, she whispered, looking up at him. I don't even know your name. Why are you doing this for me? Adrian's gaze softened, and for a moment the sharp lines of authority and confidence that had defined him melted into something warmer, more human. Because someone once helped me when I was struggling, he said quietly, and I've never forgotten it. We don't have to wait for permission to do the right thing. Sometimes the right thing is just noticing someone needs help and acting. Tonight, that someone is you. Emma swallowed hard, words failing her. She had always prided herself on independence, on solving her problems without relying on anyone. And yet here was a man, a stranger, reaching across the invisible barrier that separated their lives to offer support without expectation, without judgment. The very notion seemed impossible, almost fantastical. Adrian didn't wait for her to respond further. He spoke gently, almost casually, yet there was a deliberate weight to every word. You've been carrying so much on your own. Sometimes a little help can make all the difference. I promise, this isn't charity. It's just human decency, and you've earned the right to receive it. Emma's lips trembled. She wanted to protest, to insist that she could manage, that she didn't need this stranger's generosity. But the thought of Lucas, curled up at home, hungry and waiting, made her pause. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to imagine a night where everything would be okay, a night where she wouldn't have to worry about food or rent for a few hours. That image alone was enough to soften her resolve, enough to make her nod in silent acceptance. As they walked together toward the nearby delivery service he had already contacted, Emma felt a strange mixture of disbelief and cautious hope. Adrian moved with a calm efficiency, arranging the groceries with precise attention to detail. He asked about Lucas's favorite foods, the brands he preferred, even the little things that mattered in a small child's routine. Every question was asked with genuine care, not curiosity or judgment, and Emma realized that this man, this billionaire stranger, was attentive in a way she had rarely encountered. You know, Adrian said as he typed into his phone, these little details make a big difference. A child's favorite food, a familiar snack, they're not just groceries, they're comfort, and everyone deserves a little comfort. Emma nodded silently, overwhelmed. She had been so consumed by survival that she had forgotten the small joys, the tiny comforts that made life bearable, and yet here was a stranger, noticing them, honoring them, as though they were as important as any business decision or financial calculation. By the time the delivery was arranged, Emma could hardly believe what was happening. A small stack of groceries would be on her doorstep tonight, ready for Lucas's dinner, ready to take one small weight off her shoulders. And yet the gift card, the thoughtfulness, the care, these were things she hadn't dared to imagine possible in her world. Her heart felt lighter, though the surreal nature of it all made her chest tighten with emotion. Adrian looked at her with an intensity that made her pause. I know it's unexpected, he said softly, and I know it's a lot, but sometimes life gives us moments like this, moments where we can accept help without shame, moments where kindness appears out of nowhere. Don't let it pass you by. Emma blinked back tears. She wanted to ask how he could be so empathetic, so generous, so attentive to a complete stranger, but she didn't. Words felt inadequate. Instead, she allowed herself to simply nod, letting the weight of the moment settle in her chest. She felt seen in a way she hadn't in months, cared for in a way that seemed almost impossible, and strangely, she felt the beginnings of trust forming in the small space between them. You've really done more than I expected, she murmured finally. I never imagined someone would care like this. Adrian's lips curled into a faint smile, quiet but genuine. Sometimes it's easier than we think, he said. It doesn't take much. A little attention, a little care, a little action. It can change someone's entire night, maybe even their week. And tonight, it's your turn. Emma felt her chest swell with emotion. She thought of Lucas, his small face lighting up when she told him dinner would be ready, the little joy she had long suppressed returning in flashes.
For the first time in weeks, she imagined a night of peace, of calm, of relief, and it was all because of this stranger, this man who had appeared from nowhere and offered her a lifeline. As they walked back toward her apartment, she noticed the way he moved with quiet efficiency, the subtle confidence in his stride, the attentiveness in his eyes. He wasn't just helping her, he was investing a small piece of himself, his time, his attention, into a life that had nothing to do with him. And Emma realized that this was rare, almost miraculous, in a world that often felt indifferent to people like her. Finally, at the entrance to her building, Adrian handed her the small envelope again, ensuring she had the gift card securely tucked in her bag. "Keep this for emergencies," he said, "and remember, kindness doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to exist." Emma nodded, overwhelmed. She didn't know how to repay him, didn't know how to convey the depth of her gratitude. But she didn't need to. The groceries would arrive tonight, the gift card was there, and the unexpected kindness, the human connection, was a gift in itself, a reminder that there was still hope in the world, still people willing to reach out, still moments where life could surprise you in the most profound ways. As Adrian walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the city streets, Emma clutched her wallet and the small envelope to her chest, feeling a profound sense of relief, gratitude, and wonder. She had expected nothing, had prepared herself for disappointment, and yet she had received everything: safety, care, hope. And in that moment, as she turned toward her apartment, she realized that her night, and perhaps her life, had shifted in ways she could never have anticipated, all because of a stranger who had dared to show empathy, kindness, and human connection when it was needed most. The days following that night blurred together in ways Emma had almost forgotten existed. For weeks, her life had been an unbroken chain of long shifts, sleepless nights, and the gnawing anxiety of making ends meet. Yet now, after that unexpected encounter with Adrian, something had begun to shift. She woke up each morning with a strange mixture of hope and apprehension, as if the universe had tilted slightly in her favor, offering her a brief reprieve from the relentless grind of survival. The groceries had arrived promptly that evening, just as Adrian had promised. Lucas had erupted into delighted laughter upon seeing the familiar foods he loved: milk, eggs, bread, a small box of chocolate cereal that had been a rare treat. Emma watched him, her heart swelling with emotion, a mixture of relief and gratitude that almost brought her to tears. That night, for the first time in months, she and Lucas had dinner without the usual anxiety gnawing at the edges of her mind. She had sat across from him at their tiny kitchen table, watching him eat, and felt a profound sense of peace, fleeting but powerful. But it wasn't just the groceries or the small gift card that had shifted her perspective. It was the knowledge that someone entirely unexpected, had noticed her struggles and taken action. Adrian had not offered charity or pity. He had offered kindness, and it had changed everything. She found herself reflecting on his words. Sometimes life gives us moments like this, moments where we can accept help without shame. At first, she had hesitated to fully believe it. Life had rarely offered her such unqualified generosity, yet she could not deny the tangible effects: the groceries, the sense of relief, the warm reassurance that she was not alone. A few days later, Emma's phone buzzed with a message she had not anticipated. It was from the number that had become almost surreal in its presence in her life. Adrian. "Morning, Emma. How are you and Lucas doing? I hope everything went smoothly last night. Let me know if you need anything else." Emma stared at the message, her mind momentarily frozen. She wanted to reply immediately, to express gratitude and disbelief, but she also felt a surge of hesitation. Was it appropriate to keep contacting him? After all, he had no obligation to check in on her. And yet something in her heart urged her to respond, to acknowledge the rare kindness that had entered her life. She typed back, her fingers trembling slightly. "Thank you, Adrian. Everything went well. Lucas loved the food, and I can't tell you how much this means to me." His response came almost instantly. "I'm glad to hear that. Remember, you're doing an amazing job, and sometimes amazing people need a little help too. Let me know if I can be of further assistance." Those words lingered in my mind throughout the day. The simplicity, the sincerity, it was astonishing. Few people had ever spoken to her in such a way, recognizing her efforts without judgment, without expectation of repayment. And yet here was a man who, despite his own life and responsibilities, had taken the time to offer support and guidance. Over the next week, Adrian continued to check in, not invasively but consistently, offering advice that Emma had never expected from a stranger. He asked about her work schedule, her financial pressures, and the challenges she faced balancing multiple jobs. Each message was measured, empathetic, and thoughtful, as though he was genuinely invested in her well-being. Emma found herself opening up in ways she hadn't anticipated, sharing the minutiae of her life, the small victories, the crushing disappointments, the quiet fears she carried for Lucas. One afternoon, Adrian sent a message that made her stop in her tracks. "Emma, I know your current jobs are demanding and don't pay enough to give you the stability you deserve.
I have a few contacts at companies looking for reliable, hardworking individuals. I think you'd be a perfect fit. Would you like me to connect you?
Emma's hands shook as she read the message. Her mind whirled with disbelief. A better paying job? An opportunity to step out of the relentless cycle of exhaustion and financial strain? She wanted to ask if he was joking, if it was too good to be true. But the sincerity in his tone, the consistency of his kindness, told her otherwise. Yes, she typed back finally, her heart pounding. I would love that. Adrian replied quickly, outlining the steps and providing introductions to key contacts. He offered guidance on preparing for interviews, crafting her resume, and presenting herself with confidence, things Emma had never fully mastered, as her survival instincts had always demanded focus on immediate needs rather than long-term planning. For the first time in years, she felt like someone was actively helping her shape a future, not just survive the present. The interviews came in rapid succession, and each one built her confidence. Adrian's advice proved invaluable, helping her navigate questions she had never anticipated, teaching her to present her strengths without hesitation. Each conversation left her energized, a stark contrast to the exhaustion that had defined her prior interactions with potential employers. She found herself looking forward to each opportunity, feeling a spark of hope that had long been dormant. A week later, she received the call that would change her life. A local company, impressed by her work ethic, reliability, and character, offered her a position with significantly better pay and more reasonable hours. The moment she hung up, Emma felt a rush of emotion that was almost overwhelming. Relief, excitement, gratitude, disbelief, all collided in a single powerful wave. She thought of Lucas, imagining the stability this job would bring to their lives, the peace of mind knowing that she could provide without constant fear and exhaustion. Emma immediately texted Adrian, barely able to contain her excitement. "I got the job! I can't believe it! Thank you so much for believing in me, for guiding me. I don't know what I would have done without your help." His response was swift, almost casual, yet imbued with genuine warmth. "Congratulations, Emma. You did this. I only helped you see it was possible. You have the strength, the determination, and the heart to succeed. This is yours." Tears blurred her vision as she read the message. The journey from desperation to hope, from survival to stability, had been rapid but profound. It all started with one accidental text, one random act of kindness that had created a ripple effect, transforming not just her night, but her entire trajectory. Over the next few months, Emma's life began to improve dramatically. The new job provided her with financial stability she had only dreamed of. She could afford nutritious meals for Lucas, pay her rent on time, and even set aside a small savings account for emergencies. The constant, gnawing anxiety that had haunted her every day began to fade, replaced by a cautious optimism that grew with each passing week. But the changes weren't only financial. The human connection, the sense that someone truly cared about her well-being, had a profound effect on Emma's confidence and outlook. She approached challenges with renewed energy, no longer feeling isolated in her struggles. She smiled more freely, laughed more openly with Lucas, and allowed herself to imagine a future where she and her son could thrive. Adrian continued to check in occasionally, not intrusively, but enough to remind her that support and kindness were possible even from the most unexpected sources. They exchanged messages about practical matters, advice, and encouragement, and Emma found herself thinking of him not just as the man who had returned her wallet, but as a catalyst for her transformation, a symbol of the unexpected turns life could take when someone noticed you and offered help. One evening, as she tucked Lucas into bed, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the exhaustion, the fear, the uncertainty that had defined her recent past. She thought of the moment she had accidentally sent that text, the moment of anxiety when she didn't know who would reply, and the surreal relief when Adrian had responded with empathy and action. And she realized how drastically her life had changed since that single moment. It was more than just a new job, more than groceries or a gift card. It was the validation that her efforts, her struggles, the determination mattered. It was the recognition that kindness and human connection could exist even in unexpected, almost impossible forms. It was the understanding that sometimes life could surprise you, offering opportunities and support in ways you never imagined. Emma knew that her journey was not over, that challenges would still arise, and that life would continue to test her resilience. But she also knew that she had experienced a transformation, a turning point that would carry her forward. She had discovered the strength to accept help, the courage to trust,
and the clarity to envision a future beyond mere survival. As she prepared for her first day at the new job, she felt a quiet sense of gratitude that was difficult to put into words. She sent a final message to Adrian, simple but heartfelt. "Thank you for seeing me, for helping me, and for believing in me when I couldn't even believe in myself. I will never forget this." His reply came swiftly, concise yet profound. "You've earned every bit of this, Emma. Keep going. You and Lucas have a bright future ahead." Emma smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest that had little to do with the weather or her surroundings. It was the warmth of possibility, of hope realized, of a life reshaped by compassion, guidance, and one accidental text that had created a cascade of life-changing events.
That single text, that chance encounter, had not only returned a wallet, it had returned hope, opportunity, and a sense of possibility Emma had thought she had lost forever. And as she drifted off to sleep that night, Lucas beside her, she knew that her life had been irrevocably changed, all from one act of unexpected generosity, one empathetic stranger, and the courage to accept help when it mattered most. The weeks following her new job passed in a steady rhythm that Emma had never known before. The days were no longer a chaotic blur of shifts and exhaustion, but a sequence of moments in which he could breathe, think, and plan for the future. Waking up each morning no longer carried the sharp pang of anxiety that had once been her constant companion. Instead, she felt a quiet sense of purpose, a sense of control over a life that had previously felt precarious and fragile. The small apartment she shared with Lucas seemed brighter now, even in the soft morning light filtering through the thin curtains. Lucas, oblivious to the intricacies of his mother's struggles, thrived in this new stability. He had begun attending a local preschool during the day, something Emma had been unable to afford or arrange in the past. Watching him excitedly put on his little backpack each morning, chatter endlessly about the friends he had made, and return home full of energy and laughter filled Emma's heart with a warmth she hadn't realized she had been missing. His joy was no longer punctuated by hunger or the stress of a mother's constant worry. Every night, she could tuck him in without that heavy knot of anxiety pressing against her chest, knowing that his needs were met and that she had the ability to provide for him. Even mundane tasks that had once felt like insurmountable obstacles now held a sense of manageability. Grocery shopping was no longer a source of dread. She could buy fresh produce, milk, bread, and even a few little treats for Lucas without worrying that she would have to skimp elsewhere. Bills were paid on time, and a modest savings account was growing slowly but steadily. Emma found herself planning for the future in ways she had never dared to before. The constant survival mode that had dominated her life for years was replaced by a sense of stability that felt almost surreal. And yet, through all of this, she never forgot the moment that had sparked this transformation, the accidental text. The memory of typing a hurried, anxious message to a random number, unsure if anyone would reply, had once filled her with dread. Now she thought of it with a mixture of gratitude and awe. One simple act, one chance communication, had set into motion a chain of events that had altered the trajectory of her life. It was almost impossible to believe that such a small decision, something that could have been ignored, dismissed, or forgotten, had become a life-changing moment. Emma often reflected on Adrian, the man who had so unexpectedly entered her life. She remembered the night he returned her wallet, the quiet empathy in his voice, the thoughtfulness of the groceries, and the small gift card he had left for emergencies. Each gesture had been simple in execution, but monumental in impact. It wasn't wealth or status that had mattered. It was his awareness, his willingness to see her struggle, and his choice to act with kindness. He had given her not just material support, but also validation, hope, and the reminder that she was not alone. She had thought about reaching out to him to express her gratitude more fully, but she hesitated. The interactions they had shared had been perfectly balanced, thoughtful, compassionate, and unobtrusive. She wanted to preserve that sense of purity, that feeling of unexpected human connection, without turning it into an obligation or debt. Instead, she carried the impact of his kindness in her heart, letting it inspire her, guide her, and remind her that the world could contain moments of beauty and generosity, even in the darkest times. Her work brought her a sense of pride she had rarely experienced. The new position was challenging, but the challenges were the kind that built confidence rather than eroding it. She was appreciated for her reliability, her thoughtfulness, and her dedication. Colleagues treated her with respect, and supervisors recognized her potential. For the first time in years, Emma felt that her skills and efforts were acknowledged, and that acknowledgement fueled her sense of self-worth. It was a subtle but profound shift, one that filtered into every aspect of her life. Emma's relationship with Lucas deepened in ways she hadn't expected. She had more energy to engage with him, to play, read, and explore together.
Even simple bedtime routines became richer and more meaningful. She no longer carried the constant underlying stress that had once shadowed every interaction. Instead, she could be fully present with him, watching him grow, laugh, and discover the world around him. Each small smile, each laugh, each expression of curiosity felt amplified because she was no longer consumed by the fear of inadequacy or failure. She could finally savor the moments she had long taken for granted. One afternoon, Emma found herself sitting at the kitchen table, sipping a cup of tea, and thinking about the broader implications of her transformation. It wasn't just that she had a stable job or that Lucas's needs were met. It was that her entire worldview had shifted. She had always believed that life was a series of challenges to endure alone, that survival required a relentless, solitary effort. Now she realized that human connection, empathy, and unexpected kindness could be just as powerful as hard work. They could open doors, restore hope, and transform trajectories. She thought about how fragile her life had once seemed, how one small change, a text, a reply, a simple act of generosity, had created a ripple that reached into every corner of her existence. Emma also recognized a growing desire to pay that kindness forward. She had witnessed firsthand how transformative it could be, and she wanted to extend that compassion to others. Even small gestures, a word of encouragement, a thoughtful action, a shared resource, could alter someone's night, week, or life. The experience had not only given her stability, but also a renewed sense of purpose. She began to consider ways she could help others, perhaps in ways that were not grandiose or public, but meaningful nonetheless.
Her gratitude extended not only to Adrian, but also to the universe for allowing such a chance encounter to occur. She marveled at the delicate balance of timing, coincidence, and courage that had made everything possible. She had typed a message without knowing the outcome, acted in a moment of anxiety without expecting a response, and yet that single action had catalyzed a profound transformation. It was a reminder that life's small, seemingly inconsequential decisions could carry enormous weight, and that openness to possibility, even when fear was present, could lead to extraordinary change. As Emma walked home from her shift one evening, she reflected on the entire journey. The city felt different now, not because it had changed, but because she had changed. The streets that once seemed harsh and unwelcoming now appeared alive with potential and possibility. She noticed the warmth of streetlights, the distant laughter of neighbors, the subtle rhythms of a world moving on in ways she could now appreciate. Every moment, every interaction, seemed infused with new significance, reminding her that life could be gentle as well as challenging, that hope could exist alongside struggle, and that one small gesture of empathy could have cascading effects beyond imagination. Back in the apartment, Lucas ran to greet her, his energy infectious. She scooped him up, laughing, feeling the solid weight of him in her arms, a reminder of what she had fought for, what she had survived, and what she now had the capacity to nurture. She felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that the days of constant fear and exhaustion were behind her. The future was no longer a source of dread, but a canvas upon which she could paint stability, joy, and security. Sitting down at the kitchen table later that evening, Emma took a moment to reflect on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought her to this place. From the exhaustion of working 2 jobs, to the panic of leaving her wallet behind, to the accidental text that could have been ignored, every element had been a step towards transformation. She realized that life was unpredictable, sometimes harsh, sometimes kind, and that the intersection of courage, vulnerability, and generosity could produce profound change. Emma understood now that the world was full of people like Adrian, those willing to act with empathy, those who could recognize struggle and choose to intervene with compassion. And she also understood that she, too, had the capacity to carry that forward. The lessons she had learned went far beyond financial stability or professional opportunity. They were about trust, courage, and the quiet, transformative power of kindness. As she prepared Lucas for bed, reading his favorite bedtime story and watching his eyes grow heavy with sleep, Emma allowed herself to feel a deep sense of contentment. She was no longer defined solely by survival, nor solely by struggle. She had stability, hope, and a renewed sense of purpose. And all of it had begun with a single accidental text, one action that could have been dismissed, ignored, or overlooked, but had instead become the catalyst for a profound life shift. Emma looked around the small apartment, now tidy, orderly, and full of warmth, and realized how far she had come. The constant tension, the gnawing worry, the relentless effort to simply keep afloat had been replaced by a rhythm that was sustainable and hopeful. She knew challenges would still arise, as life was never entirely predictable,
but she also knew that she now had the resilience, resources, and perspective to meet them head-on. Finally, before closing her eyes for the night, she pulled out the small envelope Adrian had left for emergencies. She smiled softly, thinking of him, not as a savior, but as a catalyst, a reminder that compassion and attention could alter lives in profound ways. She placed the envelope back in a safe place, not needing to touch it, but keeping it close as a symbol of possibility, of generosity, and of human connection. As the apartment grew quiet, the city's distant hum filling the background, Emma allowed herself to drift into sleep with a heart unburdened, a mind at ease, and a life forever changed. The accidental text that could have been ignored had instead become a life-changing moment, reminding her that even the smallest actions could carry the weight of destiny, and that hope, when embraced, could transform despair into possibility. The story of Emma and Adrian is more than a tale of serendipity. It is a profound exploration of human connection, the power of empathy, and the ways in which seemingly small actions can ripple outward to transform lives in ways we never anticipate. While the narrative is grounded in the concrete details of Emma's life, the exhaustion of working 2 jobs, the struggle to provide for her son, the fear and uncertainty that accompanied each day, it is equally a meditation on the larger truths about life, opportunity, and human nature. Each element of the story, from the accidental text to the quiet gestures of kindness, contributes to a series of lessons that resonate far beyond the immediate events. Perhaps the most striking takeaway is that small mistakes can lead to big opportunities. Emma's journey began with what many might consider a minor, almost trivial error, leaving her wallet behind at a cafe and then sending a text to a random number in the hope of recovering it. On the surface, this was a mundane, even ordinary mishap, one that could easily have resulted in frustration, panic, or loss. In any other circumstance, it might have been ignored, laughed at, or dismissed as insignificant. Yet this small misstep became the catalyst for an extraordinary chain of events. The accidental text exemplifies the principle that life's outcomes are often unpredictable. One moment, a seemingly minor error can feel like a disaster. The next, it can open doors to possibilities previously unimaginable. Emma's story demonstrates that opportunities are not always found in the places we actively search. They often emerge from chance, coincidence, or unintended consequences. Her initial panic and worry about losing her wallet could have spiraled into despair, but instead it became the starting point of a transformative journey. The lesson here is subtle but powerful. Mistakes, errors, or unplanned actions need not be feared. They may in fact be the very openings that allow growth, change, and opportunity to occur. Connected to this is the idea that unexpected kindness can change lives. Adrian's intervention was neither expected nor required. He had no personal stake in Emma's struggles, no obligation to help, no foreseeable benefit in doing so. And yet he chose to act with empathy, attentiveness, and generosity. His gestures were small in isolation, returning a wallet, arranging groceries, providing a modest gift card. But the cumulative effect was life-altering. This highlights a profound truth. Acts of kindness, even when modest or seemingly insignificant, carry the potential to transform realities, restore hope, and empower individuals in ways they are impossible to measure immediately.